I played for the stones, and they wept. I played for their tears until they wept so much that it turned into a stream and led me here. Where is here? Where are you, Eurydice? Where?
Welcome, Orpheus.
Where is she?
She's here, and you may have her. A gift from Lord Hades. On one condition.
Name it.
Do not look at her.
What?
Find her, and to show your trust in the Lord's generosity, you must never look at her until you both are gone from here.
But how can I look for someone without looking at them?
You do not trust her to be looking for you too?
No, of course not.
Well, then you don't trust me to guide her to you.
No, it's not that. I trust you.
Well then.
Wait, no. Let's see. Oh, God. Eurydice, I can't find you, okay? Okay, I need your help. If you remember, don't you remember me? Any of it? Please. Please, Eurydice, if you remember any single moment of us, please, take my hand. Quickly, go ahead. I must see you. Come on.
Orpheus?
Wait.
Orpheus?
Wait, no.
Orpheus, no!
Wait! You ready? No. Please, I'm sorry. Please, bring her back. I'm sorry. Give me one more chance. Please. Eurydice, please come back. Come back.
Why should she?
Bring her back to me now.
Why? What makes your grief so special? You think you're the only one who hasn't experienced loss? Think that she hasn't? Him? Them? All of them? Why should you get to escape this pain? I apologize for the disruption. Please. Enjoy your stay.
Thank you both for joining us today. Why don't we have you start by getting on your feet and entering the safe space, remembering you don't aim to harm or degrade while in the space. Orpheus, tell us why you're here today.
He doesn't talk anymore. In fact, I don't think he's really looked at me since we got here. We're here because he's here, and he's not supposed to be.
Would you mind sharing why he isn't supposed to be here, Eurydice?
Well, it's simple enough. He was supposed to live.
I'm here because I love you. I am here because there was no happiness in the arms of another woman. I turned my attention and my devotion to the sun, praying for maybe just 1 ounce of warmth, 1 ray. It was of no use. There was no joy. There was no music. And then to come here and find out that it was you, not Hades, but you, who had kept me from your presence
I did
so
it
long.
for you, damn it! I just wanted you to be happy.
I was happy. for the first time in years, I was happy. The first time I saw you in this dread morass, I, Orpheus, was happy. And then the look that you gave me the first time I saw you down here, well, that was colder than any morning on the surface.
We made a deal, Hades and I. Orpheus was supposed to live a happy life without me, and then when he returned to the underworld in the usual way, we would be together. And now he seems to think he's outwitted, simply surpassed the deal.
I'm sorry. What arrangement?
The deal was that he could not kill himself. We said nothing with regards to someone else killing him.
Excuse me, don't you have a meeting with the fates right now? I'm sorry. Please, continue. Orpheus, how does the revelation that Eurydice made a deal make you feel?
Well, I feel that as someone who has made a living by being eloquent and insightful in all things, that I have a fairly good understanding of what love is and how someone shows love. But making a deal in which I have no control over my own decisions is not only egotistical, not only egotistical, it is completely undermining of my own free will.
You were supposed to love again. You had your entire life set before you to make music and be happy. I didn't. I was here in the underworld.
Let's all just take a deep breath, trying to center ourselves.
Why did you look back?
Sorry, what?
Why couldn't you have just done what you were supposed to do the first time? You know, if you love me so much.
I did it because I loved you. I did it because I loved you. And I don't understand why that has become so difficult for you to understand and to get through. I mean, what else do you want me to do? I mean, you know, I sort of felt a little bit trapped by the fine print of that oh so fair deal. And yeah, I forgot myself a little bit. And I looked because I wanted to see the light of the living world on your face the moment you first got back to it. And I'm so sorry for that, but then again, wasn't it a bit of a lapse of judgment that got us into this whole tangled web in the first place?
What are you saying exactly?
Not to be intrusive, but I am on the other side of the underworld trying to have a meeting with the fates, and I can still hear those two fighting.
All right, Orpheus, let's try to stay on topic. We'll discuss that at another time. Why don't we stay with the fact about why you're in the underworld?
Oh yeah, well, we do have all of eternity to rehash this, don't we? Well, maybe in that time, Eurydice over here can come up with some explanation as to why, in fact, she left her husband.
I told you I was chased by a
You
satyr.
know, wedding day? Yeah, of course, yeah.
That's time. Good progress. We'll check back next session. Speaking of next season, we'll be dealing with parental issues. Icarus, why don't we start with you next time?
So at this point, I'd like to actually do sort of a version of Liz Lerman's critical response process, which hopefully I'll start building into more classes. But ultimately, as sort of the beginning of the process, it's sharing things that groups did particularly well. So that is the first bit that we will share. So just talking about group one, what things worked for you and why?
I really liked that it kind of inhabited all the senses, whether, I mean, you know, especially vision. I thought that worked really well, and it set the tone for the piece. So I thought that was really effective.
Kind of off of that, they created a complete environment that we all knew we were watching the scene. There wasn't any distracting factor.
I really appreciated the use of how dark the black box gets, and being able to open up that emergency door and just have the light sort of come in very directly. It's very clever.
The introduction into the space I thought was like especially cool. Just getting like you like immediately into like the exact atmosphere thing and like the mood that they brought into it.
I thought the music, just a single piano, I thought that was really cool. Really put you in the entire environment.
And then really from that group, are there particular sort of questions that you had or things that you were working on that you sort of want feedback as to whether it worked or worked the way that you intended it to?
Question for the group. When you got the ending of your performance, was the idea that the audience would wait there until they eventually just got up and left?
We thought that by turning on the ghost light, that would be,
Indicative of the end.
yeah. But I guess in hindsight, we could have turned on the main lights, but we had the ghost light on in the beginning, and we thought by turning it on at the end, that it would be a good indicator.
Remember we had a talk at one point about turning on the main lights and we were worried that we'd like blind you guys.
Yeah.
The change in music helped. It was like happier music.
Yeah.
And then
Well, that wasn't.
goes like, well, that could have worked. That's what I'm saying. Like that was like, okay, we're out of this world now.
Yeah,
Like
that
that
was
like helped me kind of like,
I was just being stupid.
it totally worked. It totally worked.
So I think that the fuzzy ending actually really worked for the piece because it was like, I want to get out of here, but I don't know if I can or if I should, and maybe I should keep waiting to see if something happens. I know this is over, but it's not actually over because I'm still here. And I think that worked because you invited us in, and it's not actually over until we leave. So that's just how I felt about it.
Okay. Apparently not. So then, sort of the other bit, which we've kind of gotten to a little bit, is that you, as a group, can ask questions of that particular group. They are invited questions, which basically means, I have an opinion or a question about your use of costumes. Would you like to hear it? And the point of that in the process and asking the permission is because there are things that perhaps were, almost like rehearsal props or rehearsal costumes or things like that, that like if we had the budget and the time, we would have done this, but we didn't. And so we had to deal with having, I can't think of anything in particular. We had to deal with, a single piano player, and that was not our intention, but that's what we dealt with. And so we don't really need to hear comments about the music because we know that wasn't what we intended it to be. And it's really about, as you continue to build these things, getting feedback even though we know that they are not done. So does anyone have any invited questions or opinions?
There was one part where, I think it was after Oscar talked to Brayden, and he's searching. And I was wondering if you can find yourself to the center of the circle, because I think since we were in the underworld, right? Would it have worked to kind of search everywhere, search the whole room? Because it seemed like you were really confined, and I wasn't sure if that was a choice on your part or a choice.
Yeah, that was the first time that I actually stayed in the entire circle. That was just on my part, because when we rehearsed it, I was actually walking around a lot more. And I don't know if it was just because everyone was actually there at that point, but I would have preferred, like as soon as I walked out that room into the outside and it was cold as hell, I was like, man, I wish I'd walked around that room. But I feel like it was really brisk, and I really wanted, especially the original idea was to really get in the audience's face, and because as if you guys are the souls there, so I really wanted to interact with most of the people around there and kind of be a little bit jarring about it. So that was just a mind.
I have a question about the moment with Orpheus and Eurydice. Cool. I was wondering if it was intentional that it was such a big jump from being together to looking at each other, or if that was a moment that could have been further explored.
I think it definitely could have been further explored personally. Acting is not my comfort zone. So like I kept thinking in my head, okay, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, gotta milk it for all it's got. And like it didn't matter how long I counted, it was still like way shorter in reality than it was in my head. So I think that's definitely something, I think I ended up being the catalyst for it going so quickly.
Yeah, our original idea at the very beginning was Orpheus finds Eurydice, and then they have like a chase scene like around the underworld, and then you guys would be the obstacles because you're the souls in the underworld, and you would be getting in his way. And so it would have been much longer, but then as we went ahead with the planning of it, it became much shorter.
We needed a reason for him to lose her pretty much, and so we kind of went back to the whole him looking at her. So we were like, okay, how do we get a chase scene out of this and then have him look at her without making it feel strange?
So I have a question just about how much of Eurydice we saw. Yeah? Cool. So like what made you guys decide to give Orpheus more time in front of the audience versus Eurydice?
I think it was because we chose the seed of loss, and Eurydice died. Presumably she went through her mourning, kind of, in the underworld before the Orpheus came in. So that, because our seed was lost, we wanted to and Eurydice's dead, and she's gonna have to deal with it. Orpheus still has a life, still have to go on. He's the one that's really losing something or someone.
That, and also our seed was lost, but our theme was searching, and so we really wanted to focus on Orpheus is desperate to find Eurydice, and we thought that it would make it more real if Eurydice was not present throughout it, so that way it makes his searching more real.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the whole thing where originally we had the first half of it being Orpheus looking for him, and then the whole second half of it being them two trying to find a way out. And so that just kind of got chopped off.
So I kind of have a follow-up question on the idea of the searching and all that, in terms of the way that you set up the room. Is there a reason that the circle was so tight?
I think it's just placement today, possibly.
Yeah.
It did seem a bit smaller today, but
Because I wonder if, the circle was really cool, but I wonder if it was either bigger or up against the walls or something, if the idea of the souls in the underworld, or like the searching and having to weave between any obstacles might have been easier to explore. Yeah.
So the next thing that I'd like to talk about is just, so if we were to do this again at a Fringe Festival, what things do you think could improve it? What hindrances might they have? As an example, you may not have a black box. Like, using that space was particularly effective because the echo is terribly disorienting once the lights are off. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. But if you're in a space like this, or in a museum, can you still communicate the idea without having a black box? So sort of identify what those things might be and whether they're advantages or how you might change them, and also what they might do as a group in order to improve it for the future, or changes they could make that might make an audience sort of leave with a different, I don't know, leave wanting more, leave with a different idea, feel the need to, write a poem, whatever.
I've seen some things at Capitol Fringe, and I specifically, actually, I see it happening, I think it's in the shop or the warehouse, the one that's right through the Jiffy Tent, which is almost a black box space, and like, it would be really cool. I mean, it's sort of like weirdly pushing in the round, kind of an odd space to look in, but it, like, I think if you could get that space specifically in Capitol Fringe, like, this would be super awesome.
So I think that if you can't get a black box, it would be interesting to explore different ways to create an underworld that envelops all your senses. And so then you can still have the same story, still have all those same themes, but just then you would have to rearrange what the underworld is.
Yeah, on that note, you can actually do, given, if you had like a larger budget and could hire more musicians, you could really do a lot. There's a lot you can do with sound in terms of so you took away our sense of being able to see much, but you can actually do much the same thing by sort of masking everything in a very constant sound. And that can that can be a different sort of disorientation. So if you did get a space where you couldn't, you couldn't black out the space and you couldn't get that effect with light, you can possibly do that with sound.
You could also affect Orpheus's ability to sense things. Like if we're in a room that's bright, you're not going to convince the audience very well that, oh, I can't see. You could put a veil, sunglasses, something on Orpheus so that he is impaired within the underworld.
I do think it would be really interesting sort of getting back to the circle idea and being able to search if you sort of clumped us around the space so that you could actually really go in between people. You'd get a different sense of searching, and then as an audience, if we're in a black box space in particular, then I'm also doing this because I may be facing the wrong direction, which is also extra disorienting because, there's a light sort of over here and I'm trying to figure it out, and there's a human right there that's behind me that I didn't, I sensed was there, but I didn't really know. And the other thing that could be interesting if you were in a space like this would be to blindfold the audience. Not completely blindfolded, but with sort of a dark, meshy kind of material so that they're somewhat limited in what they can see, but not totally blinded. Because ultimately then some of your lighting effects would still work, and then they're also searching and kind of dealing with the space as a whole.
Yeah, it's funny. One of our earlier ideas was to actually have you guys in clumps throughout Black Box, but we were worried that with having Braden go in and out with each group that we would kill too much time because we had a smaller window. So we were like, let's just get them all in one group to put them in there in a circle.
Yeah, we've been thinking bring you guys down from here to Black Box in groups, and then I would seat you in there, and then we have been talking about putting the chairs in a random pattern, but then there were concerns about moving to and from there, and I think we also thought a circle would be better because then everyone could see, and no one would have their back to us. So we thought the circle would be better.
I think that also the outside environment, if it's in some way more controlled, then the anticipation to enter can be as controlled. So like, even if it's not bringing us from here to there in groups, if you have people stand in the line, or if you like group people. And like the circle was kind of in wedges, so you could have them, first 4 people, you know, you line them up and they have to sit in a certain order or something like that. I don't know, that could be interesting.
Could you even go off an idea like that and sit them next to strangers so that you broke the group up? That's disorienting, arriving with a group and not sitting with people you're familiar with, because that puts you a little on edge, especially if he's searching. It would be awkward and uneasy to not be with familiar people and also not know what's going on around you.
I do like the idea of sort of leaving the audience in the underworld, and that the show doesn't end until they choose to leave. And one thing that I missed Eurydice singing in the corner until after I turned the house lights on, and then I went, oh, I just ruined it. I was supposed to walk by her singing and leave.
There was also an Orpheus around the corner being like,
so I think that that's interesting. You also will always run into people not knowing what to do. Like, it takes somebody to get up and walk out of the room. So do you plant someone to do that? Knowing that there will be people who will still just sit because they don't know if it's appropriate to leave, and can sit there for a good 10 minutes before they will go, I think we're done now. And so is there a change in music? You know, the ghost light was a partial change that could signal that. You know, might there be something else sort of on the outside of the doors that could allow you to also signal in some way, not that you have to leave, but that you have the option to leave? Because I think since you greeted us as the dead, I was willing. Good, dead now, hanging out. But then I don't know where to go after that. Like, if I'm willing to take on that role, then I'm trapped in that room forever, which, you know, then I have to at some point put my audience hat back on and go, I'm not dead, I'm dead. Yeah.
Well, so if you have a space with 2 entry points, like Black Box has, I actually think it'd be a really interesting idea that you could play with, to have the option to exit out the way Orpheus went or out the way we came in. Because like then you're kind of, I think you could set up the idea that like if you exit one way, you're making the choice to stay in the underworld, but if you're exiting the other way, you're making the choice to leave and do what Orpheus did. So I think that could be an interesting game to play with the audience.
I also think that like the change of music, although not intentional, could work if it was outside the space. So then you're drawing the audience's attention out of the space and kind of leading them there, and then they walk out and they realize, oh, we're in the lobby, we're done. You know, so that could be something that you could play with.
There's also something too on the idea of opening doors, like having both of the doors suddenly open open at the end. I don't know, that's like very like a clearing the space sort of signal. You know, and then you'll have all that extra light coming in, like then you can still have the ghost light thing work, but now there's this extra light that's coming in, and I think it would be like more indicative of like, especially because there's like really bright light out the Orpheus route, so like having all that extra light coming in, people would be like, oh, we're done now because look, all the doors are open, not just the one that came in.
Going off Sarah, Orpheus came in from not underworld, from the land of the living, and so we as dead basically came in through the main door as the dead. And I think if you had, it might work, I don't know, to have just the door to the outside open, because then we go back to the living. Once, you know, we decide not to be dead.
Yeah, you can really play with what your entrances are, because ultimately you could, depending on the size of your space and how you set it up and your sound design, you can change what those entrance doors look like while we're watching the show. So that the fact that we walked through them to begin with, I mean, we are disoriented in that space. So if somehow you allow us to leave and they look different or feel different. So even if it's just a matter of, putting some sort of wall in the space in front of it, but allowing light to come through, so I see that there's a place to go all of a sudden. If that comes up, I may go there. So looking at how you might change that space, and again, this has more to do with budget and time. How you can change the space, how with things like speakers, you can lead someone through to that space. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the Drowned Man that Punch Drunk did was that at some point I was in a room and one of the actors pulled me aside and said, something's about to happen, follow the music, walk straight. And I went, okay. And that's what I did, and I actually could follow the music to a new room where crazy was happening. But, I could follow that music directly to a different location. And I knew where to go then. And as soon as you see someone on a trail, most people are likely to then follow that trail because someone's heading somewhere on purpose. So that's another option to sort of direct the audience somewhere. Because it may be that you change that entrance or there's actually another entrance in that room that we don't know about. Orpheus didn't actually have to come in from the outside, right? You could mimic that with lighting and something else, so then all of a sudden that door is revealed if you have two entrances in the space, and he hasn't actually used any of them. So that's a whole new location I can go to play with. Yeah.
You guys should do this in a laser tag maze. It would be hella disorienting.
Eurydice!
I
found you. But actually, for an audience, how many of you would, if Orpheus is searching, how many of you would try and find him searching in that maze, and how many of you would stand still to see if he showed up?
I'd probably follow him.
Yeah, I'd definitely stalk him. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, why else would we be there? We'd want to see something happen, so I'd probably go.
So if he is searching and moving around, and you are searching and moving around, and then you hear that exchange happen, and you are still looking, some of you might get to witness it, some of you would only hear it, and then the lights come on. Or you find the exit and they've already left. However that works out, that could be really interesting.
I think I'm going way backwards. That being said, some things that I thought worked really well for this was the timing with the lights and the door. So the focus points were very precise. So with this particularly, which is different from the maze and choosing to follow or not to follow, is that we were told where to look. And I think that worked really well. The other one was, I thought it was really cool that Eurydice comes out of the shadow and then returns to the shadows, and you can just hear her. That was eerie and cool. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I thought the low tech flashlight was
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Especially just the simple fact of switching it to red, I knew exactly what happened. Right? It was instantaneously, it was oh no, and so, again, you don't have to have a huge budget to make these things happen. That totally works. You can do it with moving lights and craziness, but you don't need to.
What if, Eurydice entered with the group entering the underworld? If you're setting up the premise that we're all souls, and we're all entering from that underworld entrance, if you want to call it that, then it's then I think that could tie in really nicely to searching with us and and then Eurydice emerges from the group, and then it's she was with us the entire time. Whoa.
So we actually had that as our first original idea, that I would sneak in with all of you guys and pretend to be observing. Oh no, this is such an interesting group, and then eventually emerge and be Eurydice. We had several reasons for deciding not to do that. The main one being that Eurydice has arrived to the underworld first, and although yes, the group gets there before Orpheus, Orpheus gets there, it just didn't seem to make total logical sense, but I bet that there is a way we could have made it make sense.
So, like I was saying before, I really like that Eurydice came out of the shadows because you didn't know she was there. You didn't know she was gonna be there anymore. Like you didn't know. I mean, we knew, but but I think that like that concept could be further explored with the way that you have people enter. So if you have people enter in groups of 5 and you just shut them in there and it's dark and there's only a little bit of light and they do what they're gonna do, are they gonna sit down or not, and then you let some more people in and you just kind of like let the music keep playing and everyone is kind of waiting for something to happen and nothing is happening because it's the underworld, and that could be really interesting. And then maybe some people do see her and then she returns to the shadows and then she comes back out.
That was closer to our original idea, but again, because of constraints of time, 12 minutes and Professor Casey just stands up and leaves. We didn't want to, dropping her mic on the way as she does, we didn't want to risk that.
Yeah.
And we didn't want the, like, 8 minutes of the play being just sitting everybody down and then having to do a super quick play.
Hey Orpheus, bye Orpheus.
Sorry, I looked at you.
Damn it.
It ended up being all of these ideas, we kind of had a small vision of it, and basically we eliminated a lot of them just because we ended up simplifying a lot of it because of different constraints.
Yeah, like we had too many ideas.
Yeah.
And we had to like, so.
At one point you guys were gonna get like slips explaining how you died. It got a little crazy.
And pictures, and like it was.
There was gonna be like family photo.
You're gonna write a book for every one of these.
Letters of why I got it.
I was thinking of the music in the piece, which I really love. I just love Joe. But I was wondering, because you have the piano and you have Eurydice singing to Orpheus, and in the original story, he, wins her back because he plays his lyre or something like that. I was wondering why you chose maybe not to mention that, especially since he said, give me some sign, and she was like, I'll sing, there's your sign. I thought it might have been interesting if he was like, remember that song we played, do you remember our song, blah, 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 and she starts humming it. I was just wondering.
Yeah, so Orpheus does have the line at the beginning, something along the lines of, I played for the stones and they wept, and the river led me here. And also there were a couple of reasons, one of them being that Oscar doesn't know how to play any musical instruments, so we wanted to eliminate that complication.
We were going to go with recorder, but the tone wouldn't feel the same.
But another reason being that because they are married, we wanted to play up the fact that, some of Orpheus's habits have rubbed off on Eurydice, one of them being music. And so we thought that was a good, aw, they both love music.
I mean, I assume the music happened already, we just didn't witness it.
Yeah.
That's what we're going.
It's really hard to play music so good that it'll cause tears and the entire room to stop moving because they're so sad for your loss.
I believe in you guys. I think we gotta switch gears. Okay, so the last thing I will leave you with on this, and you don't get to answer, haha, is do you leave that performance, tweeting about it, putting it on Facebook, telling someone at the festival that you've run into that you need to go see this the next time? It's really just for you to think about, and how it will inform future performances. Okay, group 2. So what did they do well?
I really like the idea of Orpheus and Eurydice in therapy. I just thought, and then everything was based on that. So whoever had the idea was terrific.
I think the humor was important to getting the whole idea across for kids. That it added a lot.
for that group, did you have sort of questions for us about what worked or what didn't, or things that you were trying to do that you're not sure if you accomplished?
Yeah. So we put it in the round kind of later on in the game. Originally it really wasn't going to be in the round. So that was sort of like a late game addition. And so I just wondered, like, is that problematic at all? Or like, did it like work at sometimes, or did parts that didn't?
I think the only part of it that was problematic was the fact that we were setting it up, and so, like, you guys explaining to us how you wanted the circle, I just felt like, I don't know how you want the circle, so I'm gonna put my chair here. And
Yeah, I think
hope
that was
it's
more,
right.
like time, like, we have to get this figured out.
Yeah, like I think like people, I mean, we could have had, like everybody came in and sat down before us, like stand up and like go stand over there while we set this up for like 5 minutes. But I think it was more of a, hey, we can nominally allocate to the circle because college students.
I think for the performance, you guys made it work because you guys were moving in a way that, you know, anyone in the circle could see what was going on. And so I think you guys made it work.
My only question about being in a circle, and this is my ignorance for not having been in marriage counseling, is just I don't know if sort of putting them on display in that way is something that would happen. Like, I genuinely don't know. But it sort of puts them on a stage within a counseling session, and I don't know if that's something that would happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think it's a really novel concept to set it in like a group therapy session, but like you're actually playing against the idea that it's a therapy session if they're like out here. But like because we're in a round, we can all see you, like when we're sitting, and it's like I was actually thinking like if you wanted to play up that feeling of it being like group therapy, like have some like coffee and donuts or something, like
name tags.
Like yeah, name tags. Like so, like and then like somebody's just there. And it's like pull up a chair and we'll get started when everybody's here. And then that setup it's becoming more integrated into the performance. And then it's like, I guess you were Persephone, right? So Persephone then is like, okay. How about we start with Orpheus and Eurydice, and it's like, because we're in a round and we're equidistant, we can see you guys from Brayden to me. Everybody can see you. So I think it would work if you guys just stayed seated.
So I think that the concept of exploring the therapy group from the beginning is really important if you want to make it work. But I also have the question of like couples therapy in a group setting.
Happens on VH1 sometimes.
Well,
yeah.
but it does, group couples counseling does happen because it's not just.
Well, it could be a support group, but it's like people who have lost spouses.
Right. It's like the question is, how are you phrasing it? I think having them stand up and stand in the middle is not going with that theme. That was my confusion about that. And then when they return to their seats, we don't know that it's over.
Like the idea was that we were coming in. I mean, the joke was Narcissus, like we were having relationship issues. Narcissus was talking about himself. Like that was the start of it, and that we came in through at the middle of it, and then like we were doing two couples today or whatever, and then at the end. Persephone, it was spring. Spring was happening, and so Persephone was leaving, which is why there was going to be, like, we were done with the session, because spring happened. And so our idea of doing it kind of, I mean, a 5-second counseling session doesn't make sense, period. And so it had to be a snippet, rather than the whole setup of everyone coming in, and then, like, starting, and then going out. Like, why would you be here for 10 minutes if that was going to be the case? Right.
Well, I wonder if the therapy session could have used more of the space rather than putting them on display in the middle. Because that's what I had trouble buying into.
I think one way that you could deal with that is start with like, okay, Orpheus and Eurydice, come into the middle, and let's start with I statements about how you feel, just like establishing that it's okay to be in the middle, because
Yeah.
obviously it's like weirding some people out, so like, just like establishing that this is normal in this world that we have entered.
And we tried to do that a little bit with the whole idea of it being the safe space with those lines. I think that's what we tried to achieve with those lines, is like making it like this is how we do group therapy in the other world, is we get in the middle and we talk it out. And like that's how we do it.
But at the same time, we didn't want to be like, well, how does that make you feel? And let's all use eyes. Like, we didn't want to do the whole, like, campy,
Yeah,
like,
we were trying to
you're
avoid
your
stereotypical.
stereotypical shrink
That was
talk.
tricky, trying to, because like, especially with like the level of humor we were trying to inject into it, it was like trying to find that fine line between like making this like therapy, but not making it like the caricature of therapy.
I think we also sort of started in a campy place, and we were not necessarily comfortable with it, but we sort of started out in this cliche, how does it make you feel? And then sort of later in the game, along with the in the round idea, we started to think, oh, this isn't a good idea, so we should change it. And that's probably part of why.
Just another idea about how you could get them to the middle is if they're having issues and they're not connecting. They're sitting on opposite ends of the circle. And then they can start their conversation sitting, and maybe when they actually start fighting, they can stand up, move around the circle, come to the middle, whichever.
That was literally what I was gonna say.
I really appreciate the creativity here, because I had been thinking of it only in the way that it was presented, but the idea that the whole audience is a part of the group, and maybe Orpheus and Eurydice simply speak first, who has something to say, that sort of thing. Also, if you remember in the movie Annie Hall, there was a case where it was like a split screen, and you had, in this case, it would be Eurydice's therapist talking with her, Orpheus's therapist talking with him, and they're talking in cross purposes. It's his fault, it's her fault. I mean, it just, the fact that we're talking about this and all the different variations suggests to me, or at least I'd like to, this is one I mean, I'm sure the first one and the other ones will be that case too, but this one's one I think would be worth further developing for a 10-minute play, fringe, because it's, again, to me, it's a really terrific idea.
I just had a question about, is it specifically couples therapy? Because like at the end you were then like, we'll deal with daddy issues next time, like you didn't have time to deal with Icarus. So is it just like therapy for anyone that's having relationship issues, or specifically for couples? Because I think that gives like
Yeah, it was
It's the relationship
group
based.
underworld
The first one's
therapy.
narcissist, and he's in a relationship with himself.
Like,
And
each
the-
session kind of had their own, like, next time we're dealing with parental issues, this time we're clearly dealing with relationship issues.
Right,
Like-
and I think part of the joke with the parental issues was that, oh, it's spring, she's leaving to go be with Demeter, so next time we're gonna deal with parental issues.
Because she's kind of just left her mom.
Exactly,
Stuck
so-
in her other siblings. Like, there was, some of that was more kind of obscure, you kind of had to mythology, like, connections to be made.
I think the ending was a little jaunty for me, you just getting up, switching hair, things, leaving. So that you could take, it was either Holler or Sam's idea of coffee and donuts, I have to leave. Next time we'll talk about this, there's coffee and donuts outside. That distinctly ends your piece, that gets your audience out of the space, and that just kind of puts a nice ribbon on the end of it. We're done. Leave.
I'm just going off a lot of things people have said. Yeah, the whole you giving up and leaving, I was kind of confused. At first it looked like something bad had happened, and I was like, oh God, what's happening? So maybe like we need to preface it with something, or give us maybe a little more background, because I did not know that part of Greek mythology. But also I really like the idea of kind of making it a whole atmosphere with the table and the coffee coffee or their donuts or whatever. I also think it would make maybe a lot of sense to have Orpheus and Eurydice come in with the rest of us and kind of go ahead and get into that kind of nitpicky, like, stop doing that, blah, blah, blah. So they kind of have a reason maybe to get up, or be the way that they're being, so that we understand that, okay, that's that kind of relationship.
I think there needs to be something else for it to be spring, because that was something that just didn't get conveyed to me as well. And I mean, with that, because I mean, yeah, you need to know mythology, you should know the obscure things. You'd also need to know it's spring to make that next step. And I mean, some sort of sound effect of birds chirping, I don't know, something that's horribly springy might have helped convey it, other than just you taking your hair down. It just kind of seems like you're like, oh crap, I forgot something. I gotta run now.
Out of here.
Yeah, not like,
Yeah,
oh, it's spring, I have to leave.
Part of this falls to I'm not very good at acting, but we did kind of discuss, the thing was we were discussing how do we end this, how do we convey that the session is actually done without it being like, okay, we're done, you know, some awkward ending. So we did actually discuss putting in a series of lines where
Like your mother's here.
Persephone, or yeah, where Hades says your mom's here, or Persephone says, peace out, gotta go, it's springtime. And we discussed that and eventually decided to kind of just cut the lines and attempt to have me convey it with body language, which was not good. So I agree, I think it would have been better with lines just because even to me it felt a little awkward. But that's kind of just how it went.
So, for me, that first Narcissus joke didn't land, and I feel like it's really important that that first joke lands, so then the subsequent humor makes sense and feels like it's fitting in. Because I was kind of thrown by like the interjections that Hades was making, and I know that you said like a 5-minute therapy session is unrealistic, but so is attending a therapy session in the Otherworld, I think. And there's a willing suspension of disbelief that like when we enter this space, it could be the start of, or I don't know, setting up the fact that we're in therapy, because like I felt like I was getting like tossed a bunch of stuff right at the beginning, and I was left trying to juggle it as the piece continued forward. And so setting up the humor and setting up the idea that this is a group therapy session of some kind would allow those jokes to land and the premise to make a bit more sense.
I think that's where Sam's idea of the name tags comes in, because at the beginning, she would have had a name tag that says hello.
Or she would have had something more like,
There's
certain, I mean, what to consider, like, we were coming to, hey, we're doing this in our classroom. So we didn't do this is why you're showing up to our program anyway, because you would have read that it's a couple of concession that Persephone is moderating. Like, come watch, or come be a part of, whatever. Like, there's a certain amount of that which, because of mythology and because of backstory, you would give anyway, as far as, to your audience as they walk in with a program. Whether we have, name tags and coffee and donuts, they'd still get a program that nominally they book through. So that's.
Or you can take advantage of the
So
space.
you can get
and
a
use
program
whiteboard.
after the show.
Yeah, I mean, well, actually, that's a really interesting question that I have then. So, if there is a festival program, is it listed in the festival as group couples counseling moderated by Persephone? Or is it called as something that makes us think we're going to see a performance? I mean, those are two very different things to walk into, and you have very different expectations. I think you could play both of them beautifully, but that is, I mean, if you choose to do something more with this outside of class, really think about what that might mean, because the idea of watching, the voyeurism of watching someone go through therapy could be really appealing to people. I mean, that's really strange, and figure out that they are actors and like, who the hell's named Persephone at this point? Okay. But it's a very different structure to walk into. Given that, you may lose some of the humor because then we don't want to laugh at people.
Right.
Or we do, because we decided to
That's
go
why
watch
we're
elsewhere.
We're all horrible human beings.
We really are. I also had, and this has more to do with the technical side of things, but I appreciate that I couldn't see Hades. I wanted him to be everywhere. And I know at some point you had talked about recording it and using speakers, and I also know this is a classroom and such, but I think that could have been very effective to sort of, because every once in a while I was like, but I know he's behind the curtain.
Pay no attention.
Indeed.
In an ideal world, we would have had speakers and, you know, like a voice modulator and all this, you know, thunder
I
and
think play with like recording it and doing that.
brimstone and
Yeah.
somebody
Big
banging on
bad.
the piano and stuff.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, which this is not.
And if you were in that ideal world, you're already playing with voices being everywhere, you could just have Demeter come in and be like, time to go, kiddo. Honey.
Get your
I
baby.
mentioned the space that we have, and kind of one of my issues was Hades goes to a meeting, and I hear Hades from the exact same place, so obviously he didn't go to his meeting. We have two doors. You could have been sitting outside of one door, say your line, skitter to the other door, say your line again. The door was open for most of it, so it wouldn't have been like, oh, I see the door open, someone is there. So you could have used the space a little more without having to do recording and voice modulation and crazy technical things.
I think something as simple as like me knowing a title, like you suggested the title. I don't know what was it? Is there a title?
I think our like working title is couples counseling in the underworld.
Okay, that alone, if I knew that, I would have like going into it. I would have had a completely different idea. Like I would have like kind of understood like who she was, or like moderated by Persephone. And also, that's hilarious. So like then you know going into that, okay, I can laugh at that because that's a ridiculous concept. That's hysterical. Let's do this. Like so that kind of like sets the mood for humor as well. And then that first joke can land appropriately on the audience member.
Yeah.
It's something as simple as a title, yeah.